Dogmatism versus common sense. This is week 10. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. Matthew, Christ warns, "Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. You shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles? Even so," that would be a really good tongue twister. Grapes of thorns or figs of thistles. "Even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Wherefore by their fruits ye shall know them." That's kind of a very common thing people can say. Christ here, as indeed many times during his teachings, counsels people to use their God-given common sense and not to rely on high-flown but undemonstrable claims. Common sense goes beyond abstract reason, for it is rooted in actual experience. Even common sense, however, is deficient when the judgment called for goes beyond sensory experience. Ultimately, what he emphasizes always, therefore, was intuitive perception. Thus, he expected more of his disciples than crude common sense, and often scolded them for being too literal-minded, as he did elsewhere when they thought his statement, "I have meat to eat that you know not of," meant that he had steaks or sandwiches secreted about his person. So that's what they thought he meant. His reference, of course, was to spiritual, not material substance. Words, even though appearing in the scriptures, are no substitute for direct perception of truth. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita says in the second chapter, "The saga who knows God has..." That's my eyes are missing my glasses. "The sage who knows God has as little need for the scriptures as one might have for a pond when the whole land is covered in flood. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind." Om, Om, Om.
This reading is from Whispers from Eternity, Paramahansa Yogananda's book of prayer poems. And this is demand for seeing the one fire beneath all soul flames. O eternal fire, thou art the little soul flames rising through the burner of cosmic manifestation. Each human being is but one flame, separate seeming from all others, and also from thy universal source of power. Thou dost appear many, finite, limited, small or large, but ever divided, shooting up as separate entities through the pores of living organisms. But thou alone art the one eternal flame. All things other are but thy multifarious appearances. This reading, this topic, dogmatism versus common sense, is really essential on the spiritual path, and it applies on so many levels. In a word, you could say, or in one statement, what is one way to understand dogmatism versus common sense? Is that one way to apply it is to think of we want to hold to the law. We want to hold to the truth. We do. Dogmatism has sort of a negative connotation of being rigid, of being sort of prejudiced, of being holding to a certain way of things and admitting no other. And that, of course, is the negative side of it. And any attitude of ours or anyone else's like that is unhelpful. But a dogma, literally, that word dogma, basically means rule or law. It can also mean belief in a sort of lesser form. But let's say beliefs are only useful if they're rooted in truth. Otherwise, as Sri Yukteswar said, the law of gravity worked just as well before man discovered it as after. It does not require his belief in order to operate. Law is law. Doesn't matter what we believe. And so this thought then of a dogma being a rule or truth, and dogmatism, meaning holding to the law and to the truth, is perfectly good. But it has sort of this negative connotation, and we might as well approach the subject from that point of view, of not being too rigid when it comes to the law and when it comes to truth. There's a story of a saint in India. His name was Bell Ears, or Bell's Ear in Hindi. I don't remember the name, though. Do you know the name in Hindi? I can't remember it. But anyway, he was named so because he had great love for Vishnu, but he hated Shiva. And so the people sort of figured this out. And so whenever he would leave his, hut and come into town, whenever the children would see him, they would run up behind him and say, Shiva, 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 Shiva. And so he took to this treatment. He had a protection for himself to be assaulted with this terrible name. And so he hung bells on his ears. And whenever they would say Shiva, Shiva, he would ring the bells so he wouldn't have to hear that name. So he must have had something in him, because one day when he was doing arati before his murti of Vishnu, the murti changed and became half Shiva and half Vishnu. And I don't know if this is where that image, first appeared, because of course we know that image of, is that Ardhanayeshwar? Or, no, that's half man, half woman. I mixed them up. Anyway, it's Shiva na Vishnu Ishwar. It's, both of them. So it was half and half. And so when, so he was doing the incense, the arati, but he closed the nostril of Shiva's nostril so that only Vishnu could smell the incense. And the Murti said, there's no hope for you. So, that's when we take, you have an experience of God, it's time to just drop the incense. Realize the purpose behind all these things. Obviously, God came to try to help him. Swamiji put it in another way. He said that, practice your kriya, finish your kriya, by extension, all your meditation, focus on it. If you have a certain time prescribed for your technique, then hold to that as best as you can. He said, on the other hand, if Babaji appears to you and you say, excuse me, I have to finish my kriyas first, he said, you'd have blown it. We have to understand the reason, the purpose, the fulfillment of the things that we're doing. Even in that sense, one saint that Master met when he was a young boy, when Master was a young boy, the levitating saint, the saint was named Bhaduri Mahashaya. He said to Master, you go deep into the silence, but have you developed anubhava? And Master's comment is that the saint was reminding me to love God more than meditation. In other words, sometimes we can get so focused on the technique, so focused on the process, so focused on I'm following everything, that we can miss the point of what it's all for. Some people come eager to have kriya. I want kriya because it will accelerate my spiritual progress. And we mentioned, for example, that's good. It's good to couple it with devotion. No. I am become master of the technique, as if they will somehow lift themselves up to God. And also, it accelerates spiritual progress. Okay, it accelerates our progress toward what? Acceleration implies velocity, implies direction, implies we're going somewhere. We're going to God. And so we don't ever want to mistake the aim and what that will be like also. Because, for example, in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the Sanskrit sloka, which I'm sure makes perfect sense in its own Sanskrit context, is often translated into English as basically meditation is or not meditation, but something represents the union of concentration and the object of concentration. And Swamiji's commentary in Demystifying Patanjali is the object. He said, it's God we're talking about, the most relishable. Think of all the idli, dosa, and chutney in the world, and multiply that by 1,000,000, and you have a taste of God. You see, it's so much more than anything. And remember, too, God is not just, yes, I'm sure I'll be happy when I get to God, if only in relief, finally, after all this. No, it's that God wants your happiness, Swamiji said, even now, even in little things, in the way that won't a parent help a child with a trivial desire? I want this, and suppose the child's been good enough. You say, fine, unless there's some reason, maybe what the child wants is harmful to it, or the child has only been focusing on toys and gifts, but not appreciating the love behind those. Then sometimes the parent has to take a different tactic. But normally, anyone you love, if they ask for something, don't you want to naturally help them? And so God is that way with us. If things don't work out, it's not because God said, I wasn't in the mood to grant your request today, or I didn't hear. God hears everything, because God is always listening with love. Not God says, I can't help hear everything because I'm omnipresent and omniscient. I know everything, I hear everything, gosh, and I wish you would stop it. No. He listens with love just to you, just to everybody. That's one of the beautiful truths behind the image of the Rasa Leela, where all the gopis were dancing with a copy of Krishna, copy-paste many times. And each one felt that she was dancing with the real Krishna, and she was. You see, we're each having our own dance with Krishna. We're each having our own dance with Master. Remember that too. Master is here for you, just for you. For everyone also, of course. But what does that matter? For you. And so be open and expect his interested listening, his interested help. So when we get to the law, the rule, it can be a guide for a time, and we have to understand basically when to follow the law, which is most of the time, and when to make exceptions. And so someone from Ananda was being interviewed on a radio program, I think it was radio, might have been television actually, anyway, by a very fundamentalist, religious person. And the person was basically saying, my way is the way, and your way is not that, so it is false. And so they were debating about this, but this person, it was after all his show, and so he was really, going forward. But then during the commercial break, when they were off, must have been TV, off camera, he spoke to this person from Ananda and said, just to tell you, before I came to religion, I was just caught up in drugs. And so it was only this religion that got me out of that. And so my friend then, when they came back to the program, was sort of in a dilemma. On the one hand, she wanted to say something for the truth and not just say, yes, of course my way is false, which is not true at all. But on the other hand, she didn't want to just point out how rigid and how foolish his faith was, because his faith had helped him a lot and saved him. And also Swamiji said to undermine anyone's confidence or anyone's faith, he said, is a crime. It's a sin, meaning it's a mistake, it's an injury. We don't want to ever undermine someone. If what they're doing is working for them, just let them follow it to its natural conclusion. They will learn much better, and they'll be in much more mood to listen to you if they find the limits of it themselves than if we just point it out. If we're pointing it out, are we really any better than they in our own way? And so she, when they came back to it, from the break, she said, when she had a chance to speak, she said, well, all I can say is that your worldview does not admit for the possibility of my worldview, but my worldview does include your worldview. And so the man thought about that and then went on. And that is a very helpful attitude to keep in mind whenever you get hit with dogmatism, because you may get hit with some religious dogmatism, maybe, but I'm surprised. I'd be surprised, because, for example, when we were living in Alwarpet, we had our center there, and there was no chance of us sort of quietly flying under the radar and no one might notice the 30 pairs of shoes outside this house every Sunday morning. Plus the secretary of the building lived in the across the hallway from us. The only other door there were two doors, ours and the secretary. And the owner and president lived upstairs and would walk downstairs and see the 30 chapels, 60 chapels, I guess. And so we had to we were going to be open about it anyway, but this was very clear. So we met the owner, the wife, very please, Ukranga, and, chai venuma, and all these, very nice, and the husband. So, what do you do on your Sunday? Well, we have a satsang. And what do you do in this satsang? And so, we start with a fire ceremony with Gayatri mantra, Mahamrityunjaya mantra. I am very glad. I am very glad you do Gayatri mantra. After that, we also, I am very glad that you do Gayatri mantra. And that was it. That was the whole interview. We passed, and we were obviously not some threat. And so in that case, dogmatism worked in our favor. But the thing is that we want to always remember, as I said, the purpose of these things. And we want to have common sense. Saint Teresa of Avila, who was a great saint in Christianity, Master said she was of our line, whether that literally meant that somebody was she was literally reincarnated as one of his disciples, or whether she was just in the same flow of union with God as the teachings of yoga. I'm not sure. But in any case, he often referred to her. She said, when accepting nuns into the convent, accepting new disciples essentially, the only quality she looked for was common sense. She said, because all other spiritual attitudes can be learned, but common sense, no, either you have it or you don't. And so this is something we want to develop. We can't be too rigid on the spiritual path. I could talk about it in a religious context, but we've moved through that, I would say, pretty well by now. So then what does it come at us as, and what do we have to look at the dogmatism at this level of experience? The dogmatism you will be hit with very often is not Vishnu or Shiva, but money, the real religion. That stop wasting all this time in meditation and find God and find some more rupees instead. And so that thought is so strong everywhere. And listen, there's nothing wrong with money. It's not that. But when we seek money as a fulfillment in itself, as material things, as fulfillment in themselves, we end up feeling half empty inside. It doesn't feed us. It's like eating paper and eating the money instead of food. It's not nourishing. We have to understand things in their context as it relates to our own fulfillment. You could say, what's the law? The thing we should do? No, the laws are that which make us happy. That's really their purpose. To put it another way, if there's some law that's coming at you that doesn't seem to be making you happy, then maybe you have to put it on hold for a while. Maybe because it doesn't apply, or because it's something you haven't fully understood its purpose yet. And so you have to always base things on your own experience. Be thinking. Use your own common sense. What applies to other people may not apply to you. On the other hand, you may have to indulge someone even when they're breaking the rules and breaking the law, because what does it even matter? Why should we be too impatient? There was a man who was at Ananda and decided to leave Ananda, and there was a policy that because all the land is owned by Ananda, that when people build a house, invest and build their own house with their own money, if they're going to leave, they have a right to be repaid for the value of their home. They can't take the home with them. They can't really sell it independently. The community sort of takes it, sells it, and so on, or absorbs it into its thing. And so everyone understands this. So when the man was leaving, he wanted double what the house was worth. And the accountant, following the law, was saying, well, we've done the assessment of the thing. It's not an unfair price, but what you're asking is double the reasonable assessment of this. And the man said, well, it's not just the house itself, but it's, I built the house, so I need to be compensated for my time also. And the accountant said, and the accountant is not just an accountant, mind you, but that was his job. And he said, I'm sorry, that's not how it works. And so this went back and forth. And Swamiji came in and he heard about this. And he said to the accountant privately, just pay him what he's asking. He said, but the rules and the precedent and he said, it's not. As Swamiji tells the story, well, I was the boss, so what could he do? So he ended up, there you go. And so the man left. And years later, the man came back and rejoined Ananda and became fully a part of the spiritual family again. And Swamiji knew, I'm sure, I think he commented that, he said it, that he knew that if this man was denied what he was asking, though unfair, he that would stick in his craw, so to speak. It would leave a sour taste in his mouth and might make him just bitter enough to not want to come back, even when he might want to in other ways, but have that feeling, yes, but I got cheated, even though it wasn't a cheat. And you see, Swamiji all the time would adjust the rules, even within the community, when it was warranted, when he saw it would be helpful to the person. He was also respectful of everyone's freedom, as opposed to, these are the rules, we all agreed to them, we all follow them. There was a man who left Ananda also similarly, on good terms, but he'd had enough. For various reasons, it's funny what things can happen to people. There was a design that Swamiji created for a Christmas card that year, and the man said, I'm sorry, I just can't accept that Christmas card. I mean, of all things, but when delusion strikes, it strikes over what, in retrospect, would you rather risk your whole spiritual life and take the ugly Christmas card, ugly to you? No, I'm safer abandoning the whole community because of the Christmas card. But when it comes, these issues seem to be colossal. And I've been struck by delusion too and had to sort of negotiate it and say to Swamiji, I think what you're saying is not the best thing, even though those words coming out of my mouth I know are wrong. But they're still coming. I was caught in that cloud for a few days. And luckily, it all had a happy ending because I was completely proven wrong and sort of, put my plan was completely dashed, which I'm so grateful for. Anyway, it's a different story. But the point is, these issues we can get hung up on and think, this is so important. This person's opinion, what I think about this person's opinion. I don't even know what their opinion is, but what I imagine their opinion. Oh my God, such a huge thing. It may ruin my whole day. Why? It's not even based in fact necessarily. At least find out what the person's opinion is. Well, they made a face. Yeah, maybe it's because one too many roti. I mean, who knows why they made a face? Anyway, sometimes it's because they did make a face. I'm not saying it isn't. Sometimes people really will. But what does that prove? It proves they're in a bad mood. And if they're taking it out on you, it proves that they're not seeing things accurately. It proves they have something going on with their heart. It's not right. It's not the right thing to do. So, as opposed to us saying, yes, it must be my fault. It's not your fault if someone else misbehaves, even if it's in response to your action. We are responsible for our actions, definitely. So is everyone else. So, having said that, we should be compassionate, tolerant. One interviewer asked Swamiji, there is so much intolerance in this world. And people who will not accept other people's worldview, people who, whether it's race or religion or anything, they're just dismissing of whole groups of people. And Swamiji said, we must be tolerant. He said, exactly, we must be tolerant. All these intolerant people. He said, we must be tolerant even of intolerance. I'm not sure if she quite worked that one out, but based on her next questions. But Anandamoyi Ma said the same thing when people were coming up. She said, let us be tolerant, even of intolerance. Swamiji also would say, the world is like this. So many people in the world will behave like this. We find ourselves behaving in moments of error, in intolerant ways. For example, we make mistakes. Why get excited? Why get excited about the world continuing on today the way it had done yesterday? And if it's the only reason we get excited is because we think my happiness is going to come in this world. You'll have happiness in God, maybe also in this world, but in God first, and in God primarily, and in God always, meaning you won't have unhappiness in God. If there's unhappiness, it's not God, except in the sense of a yearning, a longing, as was mentioned in the reading, for God. Yes, certainly. You could think of that as unhappiness, but really it's sort of a craving for fulfillment. But otherwise, this world is not our home. And so we don't have to feel disappointed or cheated somehow if things don't quite work out. As Master said, it's God's way of reminding us this world is not our home, and He's drawing us back to Him. There has to be a little bit of irritation, a little bit of something not working out in order to motivate us to seek more. In the astral world, Master said, there isn't that. In the astral world, everything is basically fine. 24-hour dosa, so many things just happen automatically. And people aren't motivated to grow spiritually. It's too comfortable. People will often tell us you should have a meditation center right on the beach, because then you can meditate and see the vastness of the ocean and so on. Whenever we've had anything like that, nobody ever comes, because it's, the beach, man. Let's go for a walk, or let's go for a swim, or wow, the negative ions, which are somehow a good thing, I'm just really vibing with. It's just too relaxing. And so we have ours, and our center is in T-Nugger. So to come back, this man who left Ananda over the Christmas card, every summer he would come back for one of Ananda's events, maybe Spiritual Renewal Week, I don't know, and he would have tea. Swamiji would invite him to tea. First of all, what was that? All these people here, this is someone who had left, and Swamiji said, would you like to have tea? You could see, wouldn't he want to give his time to the more dedicated people and not this one who had rejected? That's not how Swamiji was. He did see something in this man. I'm sure if the man had a full rejection, Swamiji wouldn't have bothered with him, or which is to say, bothered him, let him come back on his own. But the man was coming back, and at the end of the tea, Swamiji would say, so are you ready to come back? And he would say, no. And this went on for years until one day the man said, all right. And so he moved back, and that was it. You see, Swamiji knew always kindness is the highest law. This was our topic a few weeks ago. The law is perfected in love. It's related to this dogmatism versus common sense in that way. So remember always, use common sense in applying spiritual laws. One thing that helps a lot is at Ananda, you find people who are from all different walks of life, different levels of education, different professions, different everything, but all united by the real thread of humanity, which is the search for God. Because as soon as you find God, you graduate. And so when we pick life up by the right string, when we pick community up by the right string, which is to say by true values, as are given in the Gita, then we can understand what is really important, and important to us, shall we say, just to be fair, and then what other things are secondary. That's a very good basis for a relationship or a friendship. If you both, each of you, the two of you, agree on your fundamental values, in the case of you all, spiritual values. If you, for example, both have a spiritual practice, you both believe in God, you both believe that life is targeted towards finding God in addition to whatever else we do, you will find that then a lot of other things will be flexible. You can be patient with. But if you hit on that fundamental value and the other person, suppose the other person doesn't share your values at all, but they're flexible anyway, then it's okay. There are other values, love, friendship, loyalty, all those things. But we have to be careful when those values are in conflict. This is one reason why sometimes friends grow apart. Because they've had values in common, they've had life experience in common, but at a certain point, perhaps, for lack of a better word, these values have become even more important to one than the other. And the other wants to sort of pull you down and say, come on, be like me. Don't be better than me because it makes me feel bad. And so sometimes there does have to be distance in friendship. There has to be, we wish everybody well. Always be grateful for anyone who has helped you ever, even if only helped you learn how not to behave, if you understand my meaning. Instruction by counterexample. But in any case, we should still feel gratitude, but it doesn't mean we have to always be together, and we have to accept that person's view and that person's company. Honestly, there was one person who I was always trying to help, and the person ended up always arguing with me. And Swamiji at one point said to me, and I was thinking, maybe I should visit this person, maybe not. He said, I'm concerned your presence might irritate him. And I thought, perfect. That's the only reason I need to not have to go. And I wasn't asked to visit. I was debating whether to initiate a visit. Swamiji gave me the answer I needed. So we want to always have kindness, always have forbearance, patience, endurance, but also be very strong in ourselves. Very clear in what we want, very, on a certain sense, dogmatic in our love for God and in understanding that all of us are children of God. Even the saints are children of God, but they're sort of fully grown, fully realized children of God. In that sense, everyone on earth is equal. In that sense, as God's child. It doesn't mean we don't show respect. Of course we do. And at the same time, we remember our life is our own. Our life is our own to lead. It has to be, we have to be aware of other people's realities, but at the same time, we can't accept other people's values if they go against our own. We either have to see how those values are true, or we have to say, well, until I see that, I'm going to have to find my own way. Even Swamiji gave this answer to someone who was coming in to tell him that he had been in discussions with Babaji and he wanted to speak at Ananda and tell everybody about this incarnation of Babaji. And Swamiji, knowing the person the man was talking about, the man who claimed to be an incarnation of Babaji, Swamiji knew. His sense was that it was not Babaji at all, for a lot of reasons. But on the other hand, as I said, he didn't want to undermine the man's faith and say, these are why I think it's not Babaji. And in fact, the man died later on. And anyway, never mind. But the point is, not the man he was talking to, but the Babaji man. And Swamiji said, I didn't want to disturb his faith. And so all he said was, well, I'm going to have to meditate on this. What's there to meditate on? I've told you, it's Babaji. Again, dogmatism on our path. And so Swamiji said, well, Babaji's going to have to tell me that this is indeed he. And the man said, he is telling you, through me. And so Swamiji said, well, he's going to have to find another way. And he said, I have no doubt, being an avatar, he'll be able to. Anyway, the man didn't like that answer, and Swamiji didn't like, he said, to even have to say that much, but he was pushed. And not that he was pushed, but he had to give some answer to say, this is my answer. So even then, though, he was considerate of the other person's feelings. And this is what we need to remember, to be very strong in ourselves and very considerate of other people too. Not expect, they may say, you have to be like me and follow whatever, money, this, that, whatever. And you say, well, but how can you ask me to do that? I believe in all these things. But then we may say, you should be more patient. Well, it would be nice, but really those are our values. So let us live by that. Let's hope the other person can learn, but in the meantime, we end up doing a lot of healing prayers from a distance. So remember, above all, God is taking care of everyone. God is teaching everyone. God is helping everyone. It's not your responsibility to educate anyone. And also, you don't have to worry about anyone because God has his eye on them. And he's helping them. They'll be fine, whether now, whether later. But meanwhile, you get to God. Okay? God bless you.